if I'm in a room full of men and I'm talking about menopause and hot flashes, everyone has had a mother, a sister, whatever. Make that connection, make it lightheartedly. The employers get that because they're losing their women in the prime of their life who've chosen to leave the workforce because they don't have support and they don't have answers for the symptoms that they're feeling. Know your competition. I will say that's a pet peeve when somebody says, "Oh, we don't have any competition," or they miss key competitors either because they didn't do the research or they maybe didn't want us to know.
Welcome to Keep IT Healthy podcast, the show hosted by people making things happen in technology, aiming to optimize healthcare delivery, health, well-being, and fitness. My name is Jan Kamiński and I'm the co-founder of a company dedicated to improving the quality of life with IT solutions and digital advisory. We started making this podcast to amplify great thinking to propel healthcare forward. Today, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Mitzi Krockover joining us. Mitzi is the managing director of the Golden Seeds and a prominent figure in both healthcare and venture capital worlds. With a rich background in medicine and deep commitment to advancing women's health through FemTech investments, Mitzi brings a wealth of experience and insights to our conversation. Stay tuned as we explore Mitzi's journey, dive into the unique challenges of funding FemTech startups, and discuss the future of innovation in women's health. Welcome, Mitzi.
A few years ago, how I got into the innovation space was that I had a number of female entrepreneurs who couldn't find the answers for their health problems in the marketplace or in the healthcare system. And so they were going to find those solutions and actually make those solutions. And they asked me for my, quote, clinical expertise. And for me, the light bulb went off because I saw that this was the way we were going to advance women's health. This was the next step. And I literally wanted to be invested in it. So, and I knew nothing about investment, but luckily Golden Seeds, which is a national organization, 300 members, 8 chapters, 27 states, with a focus on funding women-led companies. I became a member, and we have 3 sectors that we focus on: consumer goods, enterprise, and health. So I also co-lead the health sector group everywhere, or anything I should say, from life sciences to wellness, medical, therapeutics, and diagnostics. And of course, my sweet spot is women's health. And then the pandemic allowed me to really join into the ecosystem and full force. And that's where I'm at right now.
Do you miss being a doctor? Are you still practicing or not?
I do miss the one-on-one. It's such a great honor to be able to work with patients. And when I took the position at Humana, there were 6 million members. A majority of them were women. So I felt like maybe I could just make a bigger impact. And I feel the same way with innovation and investment, that I'm helping to support those technologies that are going to provide the solutions that we've not had as clinicians, healthcare systems, and women in so long. So yes, I do, but I try to interject my experience, my previous experience, into what I do as well.
And you mentioned that you support women-led companies. Does it mean women founded or led? So if there is a female CEO, then that's okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. So no, they do not have to be the founders, but they do have to be in the C-suite, making significant decisions and having a significant amount of equity.
Okay. And with that being said, you mentioned your sweet spot, FemTech in general, of course, a space that is rapidly growing, kind of underfunded, compared to other sectors. So, in your opinion, what are the unique challenges in raising funds for FemTech startups?
It's certainly multifactorial, but the most obvious one is that still most investors are men. And that is a huge hurdle to help, especially men, understand, but also women, that first of all, that women's health is more than just reproductive health and more than sexual health. And just for purposes of the audience, the way that I define women's health are those conditions that either manifest differently in women. So we see cardiovascular disease. Women present with different symptoms, if you will, and it may be a different almost physiology. The second is those that are predominantly in women, such as autoimmune diseases, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's. 66% of people with Alzheimer's are women. And then third, those that are exclusively or almost exclusively in women, the reproductive health issues, gynecologic cancers, and so forth. So when I think of women's health, and what's really exciting is that the ecosystem is thinking of women's health in those broad ways. So the first thing is to define what women's health, or what is the women's health problem that we're trying to do, or trying to deal with. So that's number one. I think that there's been this thinking, I think along those lines, of that women's health is a niche market. Well, 51% of the population isn't really a niche market. And also that there, again, historically, we haven't had a lot of research, we haven't had a lot of solutions. And I think that is part of the challenge in terms of really needing to educate the market. So that's part of it. The other pieces that are also challenging as a funder is to look at the regulatory process. It sometimes is longer because our regulators, and obviously I'm coming from the United States, don't always have the information and education that they need to be able to assess these new technologies. And so that creates a longer timeline. And as you know, that's not just time, but that's money. And that, it's could be a negative for investors. So that's an area that we need to focus on. And then there's a lot of stigma, depending on what the issues are. And so those are the kinds of things that I think that entrepreneurs in this space are having to deal with.
Why is that the women's health is often overlooked in traditional healthcare funding, healthcare, or tech VCs? There are a lot of those that invest in health tech, but if you look at their portfolio companies, typical FemTech companies are like 5%, 10% of their portfolio. Is it, you mentioned few reasons, but how do you make a case to the investor about the potential or like necessity of investing in FemTech?
For any investor, what you're trying to do is identify good companies and maybe things that you understand so that you can understand the market forces and all of that in order to make a profit at the end of the day. And so one of the hurdles that we have to also jump over, if you will, is that women's health companies are not, certainly they make impact and they're important, but they're not charity. They can actually make money. And so that's the piece. So when we look at entrepreneurs in this space or any space, the first thing they do is they have to, really meet the basic requirements of any kind of entrepreneur or company. What does the team look like? What is the solution? And is there really a need for that solution? As you probably know from talking to many entrepreneurs, the biggest challenge in the market is that people have this great solution. Now they're looking for a problem. It's got to be the other way around. It has to fit into the workflow and the structure of where it's going to need to be. The timeline has to be reasonable, and then the financial models have to be reasonable. And I think I don't know if I said, and it really has to have a differentiator, and you really need to know what the competition is and being able to do that, to compare those. And then what is the exit strategy? So all of those things are the same, no matter if you're in FemTech, FinTech, or anything like that. The extra layer, if you will, I think for companies that are focusing on women's health, and for really, I guess the second layer is for any healthcare company, always has to kind of give a little bit more explanation, connect the dots if those funders are not necessarily, don't necessarily have a medical or a healthcare background. And then the third layer then again is to really try to overcome some of those stigmas, those preconceptions, and to show what are huge white spaces in terms of the need for solutions that will reduce healthcare costs, that will improve health outcomes, that will improve retention in the workplace, all of those things. And those are the kinds of cases that those entrepreneurs need to make.
Do you think that the best femtech and health tech startups are built by ex-doctors or people with
Oh no, not necessarily. I think that when you're an entrepreneur in the space, that you're speaking to non-professional, non-healthcare professionals, and
right?
that's why you have to do a little bit more education. I will say that for entrepreneurs in this space, and most of them, if not all of them, have medical advisors that obviously, depending on what the problem is that they're trying to solve, it has to be, if it's a diagnostic, a therapeutic, even a wellness app has to have some kind of clinical expertise or scientific expertise. And that's kind of a given in my mind.
With that advisory part, I mean, because we talked about funding a lot, right? About and VCs giving money and so investing in a sense. But beyond funding, what kind of support do you think femtech startups need to succeed? And because one was advisory, as I understand, and how can advisors and investors play a role in providing that kind of support?
This is probably true for, and it is true for all companies, but especially I think in the femtech space, it requires kind of an extra level, if you will. But investors can provide networks, access to networks. So if you're looking to figuring out how are you going to have your solution paid for, introducing folks to healthcare systems or diagnostic companies or therapeutic companies, that kind of thing, it's really important. Usually also, and what we do at Golden Seeds, because we're in so many different states, we have access to the resources regionally. And so a lot of times we'll tell we'll connect entrepreneurs with local resources. Maybe it's a pitch contest. Maybe there's state money, also to help them connect with other non-dilutive funding. And so there's lots of ways that we help. And also sometimes just to be a person that they can call in the middle of the night, because it can be very lonely and very stressful being an entrepreneur. And this sector probably has even more women in it, if you will, and not surprisingly, and they have families, and sometimes they just need somebody to talk with and to remind them that they really need to, take care of themselves and to have a community.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. But like in order to secure more investment or be more successful in, because a lot of founders in fintech are struggling to secure investment. So in your opinion, since you've been advising a lot of companies in the past, what are they doing wrong? Like, what strategies would you recommend for better communication, or maybe communicating the value proposition to potential investors, like what they can change or what they should focus on in that pitch?
I just came from New York where I was speaking on this specific topic, and we actually had a male entrepreneur in the femtech space, and we also I've had male investors. I've been in those situations as well. Women are heard differently. Just put it out there, and so and we've seen studies that have shown if a woman and a man pitch, they get different responses. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but to be very cognizant of that, but not be overwhelmed by it, if you will. So the first thing is what I said: check all the boxes. Make sure that whatever pitch, I don't care if you're doing, retail, clothes, or batteries, or femtech, the pitches have to cover all the main areas. The challenge, I do think, is the connection, because when people hear femtech, women's health, they all come with these their own perceptions or biases, if you will. So I think it's really important for especially, again, female entrepreneurs and those in femtech to connect it with that individuals, no matter who's listening to you, perspective. And so if I'm in a room full of men and I'm talking about menopause and hot flashes, everyone has had a mother, a sister, whatever. Make that connection, make it lightheartedly. Don't hit people over the head with it, but just, so many of us have had loved ones with breast cancer, so again, make that connection. Also, one of the things that somebody talked about, and I'll use this, is that you can show your connection to the product. As I said, a lot of people start their companies because they've had an experience. It's enough to just say that you had that experience. You don't have to spend the first 5 minutes of your pitch going through the entire story. And I know I don't want to sound harsh, but it was, I think a good point. Um, you've established that you can, answer questions with respect to that. And then do your market research. Show that people wanted this, show that you've got pilots that are in line waiting to do this, what the ROI is, why it's going to be helpful. Again, all of those kinds of things to make them, real and not just theoretical. And I would also say before you pitch, especially if you're pitching to men, go pitch to some friends, men, and see if they connect and what it is that they connect to. I don't know if this is relevant, but I had a podcast and I was interviewing an entrepreneur who has a hormone tracking device that with urine. And when she was looking to figure out which device or how to do it, she basically patterned it after a pregnancy test. And she showed this and she said, everyone in the room knew what it was, So again, there's a lot of things that I think that we can connect on.
Before even, you mentioned that VCs have great network, they will connect you with advisors. Let's say I'm a FemTech founder, where can I find advisory? I mean, who can I reach out to at, let's say, pre-seed, seed kind of stage?
Well, first of all, there are incubators and accelerators, and there's many. I sit on the Springboard Women's Health Innovation Council, and so we do one cohort a year of women's health entrepreneurs. And when they come to that, they have their own cohort. They go through some didactic kinds of things, and then they have this entire network of advisors that they'll put together. So that's, and again, there's many like that. The second thing is, for example, Golden Seeds, but other organizations, I would assume, do this, that basically say before you apply, you don't even have to apply. We have once a month a time set aside with our investors that if you have a question, if you want to pitch, if you want to just get a lay of the land, in that way. And we in Arizona, because I co-lead the Arizona chapter, because we don't have a lot of the resources that the coasts do, but we do have a lot that people don't know about. So it's very exciting to have these relationships with the Arizona Commerce Authority and different entities here, because it's a very innovative state. The other piece is non-dilutive funding. And so, again, sometimes accelerators will produce that, but also government. So it could be local government. It could be SBIR grants, especially if you're having to do clinical trials. And with that SBIR program through the NIH, that's Small Business Innovation and Research, I believe. But anyhow, just Google SBIR for now. And they not only provide money and funding, but they also provide an infrastructure and networks. So a lot of times money comes with resources. And so those are the kinds of things that I would look for. There was just a huge in terms of comparison, investment in women's health through ARPA-H in the United States for $100 million. It was called Sprint for Women's Health, and it's already that has been closed. But it was also, again, another not only funding, but a way for individuals to get resources for their companies.
Okay, and I want to talk about some trends and potential here. I mean, for instance, we talked about FemTech as a general industry, but in Golden Seed, are there any areas that you're focused on that are really interesting to you at the moment within the FemTech side?
There's just a lot going on. So certainly AI is there, especially and in women's health. It's so important. For example, we're seeing a lot of AI supported imaging, such as with mammography, so that when you have an individual, 40% of women have dense breasts, this might be able to reduce the need for that secondary test to look further, like ultrasound or MRI, because so many people don't follow up, or it's too expensive right now, though there's legislation pending to change that. Also, AI's role in personalized medicine. We're getting lots of not only data and information in the research that's being conducted, but we're also getting tons of information from personal wearables that is, again, personal to that individual. So to be able to combine that information for one individual is very exciting and happening right now. There's regenerative AI that will, again, the more it knows you, the more be able to be more precise in terms of recommendations. There certainly is a lot of need, again, for diagnostics and therapeutics for things that we have not addressed: endometriosis, PCOS, lung cancer in women. 2/3 of people who never smoked with respect to lung cancer, who have lung cancer, are women, and we don't know why. And so the research needs to happen, but also the way to screen, because we don't have a good way of screening. We screen smokers, but you can't, there's no way to screen everybody. What else? Osteoporosis. Again, I think that there's just a lot of white spaces in different areas, and menopause has certainly made a splash. And that is so important because the employers get that because they're losing their women in the prime of their life who've chosen to leave the workforce because they don't have support and they don't have answers for the symptoms that they're feeling. So that's a piece. Certainly maternal health needs to continue to be supported because our numbers are so dire. And also mental health. And so again, I could go. The list is endless, which is a great news for entrepreneurs, depending on what their area of interest is. But I think it's really we're just starting, if you will. Even though I've been in this for a few decades, it feels very different this time.
What are the key components that a FemTech company needs to scale and succeed? We're talking about products, that's obviously one. But maybe are there any other aspects that you're really interested in? So let's say amazing founders, and based on the founders, what I mean by amazing is 10 years of clinical experience at YXZ or X Google X whatever, or maybe something else.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right. So there's, again, there's all those parameters that we talked about in terms of just what makes a good team. Forget if it's FemTech or a good pitch. In women's health, it's very important to have a good user experience and to really think about how to make it more accessible, whether it's manually accessible, whether it is an issue of health literacy, language, culture. I think those things are extremely important if you're going to be successful. What I've been very heartened as well, when I first got into this space, I was a little bit worried, was it going to be all kind of snake oil and wellness products and all of that? What I have been so impressed by is the level of rigor that these entrepreneurs bring to the design of their products, as well as the science and the evidence. And then they look at the outcomes. And so a good entrepreneur or a good company or a good product is based in good science, as well as, again, what is the outcome? What is the ROI for your customer, whether it's health for the client? And in digital, I think it's really a great example because you can build a digital app that, but if it doesn't engage someone, you're not going to get those outcomes that you're proposing. And if that's the case, your paying customer, whether it be the government, the employer, the insurer, is not going to pay for it. So you really have to be cognizant of those things. And then you have to also be very cognizant of if you're going through a regulatory process, what that means, and start making connections sooner rather than later so that you're not surprised, because it does take time and it does take relationships for that to happen. And again, for the investors, they want to know how this is going to be paid for, whether you've talked to those health plans or employers or what have you, or is it going to be affordable and accessible? And more, you're getting the question, how does this interact with diverse customers? And so if you haven't tested those products on a diverse population, then that's already, you really need to go back and do that.
And what's the process? I mean, I want to understand that for the listeners that, for example, would be interested in pitching to yours or any other, let's say, funds out there. Let's say you get into the room and you pitch, and then you send the presentation and people review it. But like, what happened next? Do you run a, I don't know, fact check on the problem that someone mentioned, or what's the process?
So I can tell you what we do at Golden Seeds. So we have a health sector group that I mentioned. So it's a group of professionals that either we've been in the business for a while, or we've retired from the business, but we have individuals that are clinicians, scientists, pharma folks, device folks, again. So they bring that expertise along with their investment expertise, and we review all of the health related or life science related applications. And first of all, we have certain criteria, so they have to be in the right space for us in terms of funding. And then we do a little bit of a deep dive. Again, you can't do very much with just a presentation, but to see, is this a need? Does this make sense from a business standpoint and a competition? And again, having the advantage of having people in the space, a lot of times we know what the competition is in our selective areas. And then we invite the ones that we are either having more questions about and want to know more about to a screening. And they come and they pitch for 10 minutes. And then we have Q&A for 10 minutes. And then we have a discussion. Part of that discussion is about the science or the product fit or, all of that. But it also is, and I want entrepreneurs to understand this, we're individual investors, even though we invest as a group when we do that in a certain company. So we also have to take the temperature in the room. Do we think that our investors have an appetite for this? Okay, it has nothing to do with product, has nothing to do with the quality or whatever it is, other than, again, is this the space that we think our investors are going to invest in? And if so, and all the other things seem right, we send them to forum, and forum is where others can come in and listen, and if there's again more interest, we go what's called deep dive, and we invite our investors and our entrepreneur, and we give them questions that go a little bit deeper. So we might want to push in a little bit about how they're different in the market, or what their science is, or have they talked to health systems, or if it's a device, do they know that this is going to be adopted in a very busy workflow, in those kinds of things. And then if we still are interested, then we go into due diligence, and that's when we'll confer with other investors. We'll do the calls, to others, and really do the due diligence. Basically, do due diligence.
Also, I wanted to get back to the, let's say, evolution of the healthcare industry, because you've been in the business for a while, and you've seen that evolution. And how, in your opinion, how has the conversation around women's health changed?
Everything old is new again. And I was going back through some of my papers from when I was in academia, and some of the questions are still there. Some of the topics are still there. And we had at that time the NIH had the Revitalization Act, which said you had to include women and other underrepresented groups in medical research or life science research. And the centers of excellence were created, and of course, of which UCLA was one of those. Fast forward, we have heard about the White House Women's Health Research Initiative, and someone said, I was here before. What's different? I'm very excited about what's different, because here's what's different. And as you said, I've been around for a while. Number one, the technology is different. We have so many more tools at our disposal. We also have more women in every place, whether they be scientists, clinicians, government, payers, employers, and even investors. And so that is something that I think really does drive this farther than it could have been otherwise. And we have a much more informed consumer. right? Because of social media and all of that. So, and those that want to advocate for themselves, and they're not afraid to do that. So I think that has been different as well. And then also on the government side, there's been more money for entrepreneurial endeavors in the scientific area. So you see a lot more translation of science into commercial endeavors. So that's what's different. That's what's exciting. That's what's I think is going to continue to propel. And then again, as we get bigger wins, and I think that's been a challenge because we haven't seen those big unicorns. I know that Flow, is a great company and was able to do that. We need to see more of that. And also, I think as employers see the advantage of having a healthier workforce, especially since a lot of that workforce are caregivers. So so it's kind of a virtual circle or a cycle, if you will. Again, I don't want to be Pollyanna and extraordinarily optimistic, but I do think we're going to make some progress.
Okay, and we always ask about advice, especially for the founders that listen to us. If you were to give 3 or 2, it can be 2, advice for female founders that are navigating in that, as you mentioned, often male-dominated world, especially of venture capital, and what advice would you give to them, particularly in the context of healthcare and FemTech?
A couple of things. First of all, just again, know that what you are creating is a true solution to a problem that's there, and be flexible. I've seen a number of companies that have started out with something, and then as they've gone along, they've realized that they need to make some adjustments. Don't be afraid to pivot. Again, know your competition. I will say that's a pet peeve when somebody says, "Oh, we don't have any competition," or they miss key competitors either because they didn't do the research or they maybe didn't want us to know. So I know this is more than 2, but I'll just kind of go through my list really quickly. And just make the case. It's again, and try to make a connection, if you will. Find those investors that have invested in FemTech before, and those accelerators that will provide support. And the last thing, again, I can't help it. I'm a woman, a mother, and an investor. You got to take care of yourself. You got to sleep. You got to eat, and you've got to get a community around you so that when it gets hard, you can keep going.
Yeah, that's nice. And you also run your own podcast. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
It's called Beyond the Paper
Paper
Gown.
gown.
What's the story?
It actually is related. I've always thought and known that women's health, or the health of women, is impacted on not just the medical conditions that we experience, but all of those things, whether or not the research has been done, policies, politics, and what we call social determinants of health. Are we safe? Do we have transportation? Are we caregiving? All those external factors. And the other one is innovation. And I was at a conference on women's health, and again, knowing some of these innovators that are already, or innovations that are already on the market, they weren't being provided as solutions to some of the issues. And I realized that the doctors didn't know about them either. So I really wanted to have that conversation about all of those factors and help people understand the bigger picture, and maybe why, when we don't have enough research, doctors don't feel or aren't equipped with the information that they need to give to their female patients. And in that way, maybe that's why women feel dismissed. Well, I wanted them to know about these innovations so that they could take them to their doctor. So I interview clinicians, scientists, policymakers, innovators, funders, and just to really try to make the women's health ecosystem, which is what we're really talking about, less mystifying, and maybe help women understand a little bit more so that they can navigate their own healthcare.
And where can our viewers and listeners find you?
Our website is beyondthepapergown.com, And the podcast itself is on all the different podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, and Audible, and all of the others.
Mitzi, thank you very much for joining today and sharing all those thoughts with us.
Oh, it's a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me.